Sarah Whitmore pressed her dead sister's baby against her chest as the train screamed away from Willow Creek Station, leaving her stranded in Montana territory, with $17 a carpet-bag of lies and a heart full of shattered dreams. Her mail-order groom had vanished, sold everything, left her with nothing but dust and despair. Then a stranger's voice cut through her panic. "Ma'am, you look like you need help." She turned to face the cowboy, whose kindness would either save her life or destroy what little remained of her heart. Subscribe to follow Sarah's journey, and comment which city you're watching from. I want to see how far her story travels across the world. The baby started crying the moment the train pulled away. Sarah Whitmore stood frozen on the wooden platform of Willow Creek Station, watching the last car disappear around the bend, taking with it her final connection to the world she'd known. The Montana wind cut through her thin traveling dress like a knife, and 7-month-old Rose squirmed against her shoulder, wailing with the desperate hunger of a child who'd been traveling for 6 days straight. "Hush now, sweetheart," Sarah's voice cracked. "Hush, we're here. We made it." But made it to what? She looked around the platform. Empty. The station master had already retreated inside his office, clearly uninterested in a woman traveling alone with an infant. Beyond the depot, she could see the main street of Willow Creek, a handful of weathered buildings, a general store, what looked like a saloon, and not a single familiar face. Not a single person waiting for her. Sarah pulled the letter from her pocket with trembling fingers, though she'd memorized every lying word weeks ago. "My dearest Sarah, I have prepared everything for your arrival. The ranch house is ready, the wedding dress is ordered, and my heart is counting the days until you become my wife. I will be waiting at the station with a buggy and flowers. Your devoted William Parker." William Parker, the man who'd written her beautiful letters for 3 months, the man who'd sent money for her train ticket, the man who'd promised her a new life, a home, a future worth crossing a continent to claim. The man who, according to the station master, had sold his ranch 2 months ago and disappeared heading west toward California. "Excuse me." Sarah approached the station office window, Rose still crying against her shoulder. "Please, sir, are you absolutely certain about William Parker? Perhaps there's been some confusion?" The station master didn't even look up from his newspaper. "Ain't no confusion, miss. Parker's gone. Everyone in town knows it. Sold out to the Langston outfit back in September. Left owing money to half the merchants in Willow Creek." "But he wrote to me. Just 3 weeks ago he wrote." Then he lied. The man finally met her eyes, and she saw no sympathy there, only the weary judgment of someone who'd seen too many desperate women arrive on trains expecting promises to be kept. Wouldn't be the first time a man told tales to get what he wanted. Won't be the last. Sarah's throat tightened. Is there a boarding house somewhere I might stay while I..." "Mrs. Crawford's place, 2 streets over Blue House with the picket fence." He paused, then added with unmistakable meaning, "She runs a respectable establishment. Charges $3 a night, meals included. Don't take in just anybody." $3 a night. Sarah had $17 to her name. $17, a crying baby, and no plan. She stepped back from the window, her mind racing. 6 days. She could afford 6 days, and then what? She had no skills that would earn money in a frontier town. She had no connections, no family, no one expecting her anywhere in the world. She had Rose. That was all she had left of her sister Elizabeth, all that remained of the family she'd once known. And she had promised, Lizzie had sworn on her sister's deathbed, that she would protect this child no matter what. Well, well. A male voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "What do we have here?" Sarah turned to find 3 men had emerged from the saloon across the street. They were walking toward her with the loose-limbed swagger of men who'd been drinking since morning, their eyes moving over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "Looks like Parker's mail-order bride finally showed up." The speaker was heavy-set with a thick beard and mean little eyes. "Too bad Parker ain't here to collect her." "Shame that." Another man grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. Pretty thing like her coming all this way for nothing. Sarah clutched Rose tighter and stepped backward, her heel catching on a loose board. I'm just waiting for someone. Ain't nobody waiting for you, sweetheart. The bearded man moved closer. Parker lit out of here with his tail between his legs. But don't you worry. We can help you get settled in just fine. I don't need your help. Now that ain't friendly. He reached toward her arm. The lady said she don't need your help, Garrett. The voice came from behind her, quiet, steady, carrying an authority that made all three men freeze in place. Sarah spun around. The man standing there was tall, maybe 6 feet, with dark hair visible beneath a dusty hat, and brown eyes that held no warmth for the three drunks, but seemed to soften slightly when they met hers. He wore simple ranch clothes, worn but clean, and his hand rested casually near the pistol on his hip. This ain't your business, Callahan, the bearded man, Garrett said, but his voice had lost its swagger. Reckon I'm making it my business. The tall man stepped forward, positioning himself between Sarah and the others. You boys got somewhere to be. We was just being friendly. Looked like you was being something else entirely. His voice never rose, but something in it made Garrett take a step back. Mrs. Crawford's place is 2 streets over, ma'am. I'd be happy to walk you there if you're willing. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she could barely think. This man was a stranger too. She had no way of knowing if his help came with strings attached, no way of knowing if she was trading one danger for another. But Rose was crying, and Garrett was still staring at her with those mean little eyes, and she had no other options. Thank you, she heard herself say. I'd appreciate that. The tall man tipped his hat to her, a small, old-fashioned gesture of respect, then turned to face Garrett and his companions. You boys enjoy the rest of your afternoon. It wasn't a suggestion. They walked away from the station in silence, Sarah struggling to keep pace while holding Rose and her carpet bag. The man Callahan Garrett had called him matched his stride to hers, without comment, staying close enough to offer protection, but far enough to maintain propriety. I'm Elijah Callahan, he said finally. Most folks call me Eli. Sarah Whitmore. That your little one? My niece. Sarah's voice caught. Her mother. My sister. She passed. In childbirth. Eli was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry for your loss. 3 words. Simple, direct, genuine. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back furiously. You came out here for Parker, Eli said. It wasn't a question. I thought I did. Sarah laughed bitterly. Turns out I came out here for nothing. What will you do now? I don't know. The admission cost her something to speak aloud. I have enough money for perhaps a week's lodging. After that, she trailed off. After that, she had no idea, no prospects, no plan, nothing but a baby to protect and promises to keep. They reached a blue house with a weathered picket fence. Before Sarah could knock, the door opened to reveal a gray-haired woman with sharp eyes and a mouth set in a permanent line of disapproval. Mrs. Crawford? Eli removed his hat. This is Miss Whitmore. She's new to town and needs a room. The woman's eyes moved from Eli to Sarah, to the crying baby, and her expression soured further. I run a respectable house, Mr. Callahan. I don't take in just anybody. Miss Whitmore is respectable, ma'am. She's had a difficult journey, that's all. I heard about Parker's mail-order bride. Mrs. Crawford crossed her arms. Heard she arrived today expecting a wedding and found nothing but an empty ranch. That true? Sarah's cheeks burned. It's true that Mr. Parker made promises he didn't keep. It's also true that I'm a respectable woman who can pay for lodging and simply needs $3 a night, meals included. Payment in advance. No visitors after 8 o'clock and no noise after 9. Mrs. Crawford's gaze was withering. The baby going to be a problem. Rose is a good baby. She's just hungry and tired from traveling. The landlady didn't look convinced. One night. We'll see how it goes. Sarah dug into her reticule, and pulled out $3 precious, handing them over with fingers that trembled only slightly. Mrs. Crawford counted the money, nodded once, and stepped aside to let her enter. "Thank you," Sarah said to Eli, turning at the doorway, "for your help. I'm not sure what would have happened if you hadn't—" "Don't mention it." He put his hat back on, shadowing his eyes. "Ma'am, I don't mean to pry into your business, but if you find yourself in need of work, I might have something." Sarah's guard went up instantly. "What kind of work?" "Honest work." His voice was steady, his eyes direct. "I have a ranch about 15 miles north of town. Lost my parents 6 years ago, been running it alone since. I could use help with cooking and keeping house. I'd pay fair wages, provide room and board for you and the baby." "You're offering me a position as a housekeeper." "I'm offering you options." Eli touched the brim of his hat. "You don't have to decide anything now. But if Mrs. Crawford's hospitality runs out and you need somewhere safe to go—" He paused. "I'll be in town until tomorrow afternoon, picking up supplies at the general store. You can find me there if you want to talk more." He turned and walked away before she could respond, his boots echoing on the wooden boardwalk until he disappeared around a corner. Sarah stood in the doorway for a long moment, Rose finally quieting against her shoulder, her mind spinning with everything that had happened in the past hour. A stranger had offered her help. Twice now, once on the street, once with an offer of employment. Either he was the most decent man she'd ever met, or he was playing a longer game than Garrett and his friends. "You coming in or not?" Mrs. Crawford's voice cut through her thoughts. "I haven't got all day." Sarah stepped inside. The room she was given was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a single window that looked out over the back alley. Sarah laid Rose on the bed and immediately set about preparing a bottle from the canned milk she'd been rationing throughout the journey. The baby drank desperately, her little hands gripping Sarah's fingers, her eyes locked on Sarah's face with complete trust. "I know, sweetheart." Sarah's voice broke. "I know you're hungry. I'm so sorry. I'm doing the best I can." Rose finished the bottle and promptly fell asleep, exhausted from days of travel and the stress she was too young to understand, but old enough to feel. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed watching her niece's peaceful face, and finally allowed herself to cry. She cried for Lizzie, her beautiful sister, who'd trusted the wrong man and paid for it with her life. She cried for the life she'd imagined when she'd answered William Parker's advertisement, the home and stability she'd thought she was traveling toward. She cried for her parents, dead these 5 years now, and for the respectable existence in Philadelphia that had crumbled after Lizzie's scandal. And when she was done crying, she dried her eyes and started thinking. Elijah Callahan had offered her work. It could be a trap. It could be something worse than what Garrett had planned on that platform. A woman alone in the wilderness with a man she didn't know, no witnesses, no protection. The vulnerability of it made her stomach clench with fear. But staying here wasn't safe either. She had money for 6 days, maybe 7, if she skipped meals. And then what Garrett and his friends would still be in town. Mrs. Crawford's judgment would only deepen. And the honest work available to a woman in a place like Willow Creek? Sarah didn't want to think about what that might mean. At least Callahan had offered her employment. Housekeeper, cooking and cleaning. Nothing improper suggested, nothing demanded. She thought about the way he'd stepped between her and danger without hesitation. The way he'd spoken to her politely, respectfully, like she was a person worth helping, rather than a problem to be managed. She thought about his eyes, the steadiness in them. The way he'd looked at Rose without disgust or calculation, just quiet acknowledgement of a child who deserved better than she was getting. Sarah didn't trust him. She couldn't afford to trust anyone, not after everything she'd been through. But she was running out of options, and Elijah Callahan was the only one being offered. A knock at her door made her jump. "Supper's at 6. Mrs. Crawford's voice came through the wood. "Don't be late and keep that baby quiet during the meal." "Yes, ma'am." Sarah waited until the footsteps retreated, then looked down at her sleeping niece. "What am I going to do, Rose?" she whispered. "What would Lizzie want me to do?" but she already knew the answer. Lizzie would want her to survive. Lizzie would want Rose to have a chance at a good life away from the scandal and shame that had destroyed their family in Philadelphia. Lizzie would want Sarah to be brave. Tomorrow, Sarah would go to the general store and find Elijah Callahan. Tomorrow, she would listen to what he had to offer. And then, she would make the hardest decision of her life. Supper that evening was an ordeal. Mrs. Crawford served plain fare, boiled beef potatoes bread without butter, to a table of 6 boarders, all of them men, all of them staring at Sarah with undisguised curiosity. "You're Parker's mail-order bride," one of them said. He was older with gray in his beard and a merchant's soft hands. "Heard about you at the store today." "I was going to be Mr. Parker's wife, yes." Sarah kept her voice even. "Obviously, circumstances have changed." "What are you going to do now?" Another man younger with the weathered look of a ranch hand. "Town like this ain't got much use for a single woman with a baby." "I'm exploring my options." "I'll bet you are." This from a third man, his tone suggestive enough to make Mrs. Crawford clear her throat sharply. "That's enough of that talk at my table, Mr. Harris." "Just making conversation, ma'am." Sarah ate quickly, excused herself as soon as politeness allowed, and retreated to her room with Rose. She could hear the men's laughter through the floor, could imagine what they were saying about her, and felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. This was her life now. Whispers and speculation, assumptions about her character based on nothing but the fact that she'd arrived alone and desperate. In Philadelphia, after Lizzie's scandal, it had been the same. The sideways looks from neighbors. The servants who quit without notice. The invitations that stopped coming. Society had judged Lizzie for being seduced by a married man, and when Lizzie died, that judgment had transferred to Sarah. She'd thought she could escape it by coming west, build a new life where no one knew her past, where she could be simply Sarah Whitmore. A respectable widow, she'd planned to claim widowhood with an infant to raise. Instead, she'd walked into a different kind of judgment, not for her sister's sins, but for her own desperate circumstances. "It's not fair," she whispered to Rose, who was sleeping peacefully in the center of the bed. "None of this is fair." But fair had nothing to do with survival. Sarah had learned that lesson the hard way, watching her sister waste away from shame and a difficult pregnancy. Fair was a luxury for people with options. Sarah had no options. Except one. She found Elijah Callahan at the general store the next morning, just as he'd said she would. He was loading supplies into a wagon flour sugar coffee ammunition, moving with the easy efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times before. "Miss Whitmore." He straightened when he saw her approaching, removing his hat, in that same old-fashioned gesture of respect. "You found me. I wanted to hear more about your offer." "Fair enough." He set down the sack of flour he'd been carrying. "Mind if we talk while I work? I've got a lot to load before I head back." "Of course." Sarah stood nearby, Rose awake and watching everything with wide, curious eyes, while Eli continued loading his wagon and talking. "Ranch is called the Broken Bow, about 15 miles north of here up near Copper Creek. It's not much main house barn corral, maybe 60 head of cattle right now, but it's mine free and clear. No debt, no mortgage." "You said you've been running it alone for 6 years, since my folks passed." His voice was matter-of-fact, but Sarah heard the grief underneath. "Fever took them both the same week. I was 21. My sister Rachel was 17. She stayed for a couple years, helped me get things figured out, then married a miner and moved to Colorado." "So you're completely alone out there." "Me and my dog Bear." Eli hefted another sack into the wagon. "I won't lie to you, Miss Whitmore. It gets quiet. Lonelier than I'd like sometimes. But it's peaceful too. Safe. The kind of place where a person could catch their breath, figure out their next move." "And what would you expect from me?" He stopped working and turned to face her fully. "Cooking, cleaning, general housekeeping. I can pay $2 a week plus room and board for you and the baby. You'd have your own room with a lock on the door. I wouldn't—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I wouldn't expect anything that wasn't part of the job. No obligations beyond the work we agreed to." Sarah studied his face, looking for the lie. Looking for the calculation, the hidden agenda, the trap. She found nothing but directness and what appeared to be genuine sincerity. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you help me?" "Because 6 years ago when my parents died, and I was about to lose everything, the neighbors helped me." Eli's voice was quiet but firm. "Brought food. Taught me what I didn't know about ranching. Never asked for anything in return. Said that's just what folks do for each other out here." He met her eyes. "Maybe I'm just trying to pay that forward. And if I say yes, what happens? I finish loading this wagon and you come back to the ranch with me. Today if you're willing. The weather's turning, snow's coming soon, and the road gets harder to travel once winter sets in." Today. Sarah's heart hammered. Today she would leave town with a man she'd met yesterday, travel 15 miles into the wilderness, and trust him with her life and her niece's life, based on nothing but instinct and desperation. It was madness. It was also her only option. "I need to get my things from Mrs. Crawford's," she heard herself say, "and settle my account." Something shifted in Eli's expression. Relief, maybe. Or hope. "I'll wait here. Take whatever time you need." Sarah walked back to the boarding house in a daze, Rose bouncing on her hip, her mind racing with second thoughts and fears. She could still change her mind. She could stay here, find some other way, figure out some other option. But there was no other option. She'd known that since yesterday on the platform, watching her last connection to safety disappear around a bend. Mrs. Crawford accepted her payment and her notice with pursed lips and obvious disapproval. "Going off with Callahan, are you?" "He's offered me employment." "Is that what they're calling it these days?" The landlady sniffed. "Well, it's your life to ruin. Just remember there's no coming back from certain choices." Sarah wanted to defend herself, wanted to explain that Eli had promised nothing improper, that this was about survival, not scandal. But what was the point? Mrs. Crawford had already made up her mind, just like everyone else in this town had made up their minds the moment Sarah stepped off that train. "Thank you for your hospitality," Sarah said instead, and carried her carpet bag out the door. The wagon ride out of Willow Creek was quiet at first. Eli handled the horses with practiced ease while Sarah sat beside him, Rose in her arms, watching the town grow smaller behind them until it disappeared entirely. "Scared?" Eli asked finally. "Terrified," Sarah admitted. He nodded as if this was the only reasonable answer. "That's fair. You don't know me from Adam, and here you are heading into the middle of nowhere with nothing but my word that you'll be safe." "Your word, and my complete lack of alternatives." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "That too." They rode in silence for a while longer. The landscape around them was vast rolling hills, endless sky-scattered trees turning gold with autumn. Beautiful in a stark and unforgiving way. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said. "Go ahead." "Those men yesterday, Garrett and his friends, they backed down when they saw you. Why you're one man? There were 3 of them." Eli was quiet for a moment. "Garrett works for a man named Victor Langston, biggest rancher in the territory. Langston's been buying up smaller spreads for years, and he's not always particular about how he does it." His jaw tightened. "I've made it clear that the broken bow isn't for sale no matter what tactics he uses. Garrett knows I mean it. He's tried to buy your ranch, tried threats first, then offers, then more threats." Eli shrugged. "I don't scare easy, and I don't sell what my parents built. So we've reached what you might call a standoff." Sarah absorbed this information. She'd escaped one dangerous situation only to walk into another. "Are you in danger?" she asked quietly. "Am I putting Rose in danger by coming out here?" Eli turned to look at her, his expression serious. "I won't lie to you, Miss Whitmore. Langston isn't happy with me, and he might make trouble eventually. But my ranch is my home, and I intend to keep it." His voice softened. "I also intend to keep anyone under my roof safe. That includes you and your niece." "Why should I believe you?" "You probably shouldn't." He turned back to the horses. "Believing strangers is what got you into this mess in the first place. But I hope that over time, you'll see I mean what I say." Rose chose that moment to wake up and start fussing, demanding attention and food. Sarah pulled out a bottle she'd prepared that morning, grateful for the distraction, and spent the next few minutes focused entirely on her niece. When she looked up again, Eli was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "She's lucky to have you," he said quietly. "That baby. Not everyone would take on a child that isn't theirs." "She's my sister's daughter." Sarah's voice was fierce. "She's mine in every way that matters." Eli nodded slowly. "I believe you." And somehow, impossibly, Sarah found herself believing him too. They arrived at the Broken Bow as the afternoon sun was painting the hills in shades of gold. Sarah's first impression was surprise. She'd expected a rough bachelor's cabin, something crude and barely functional. Instead, she found a proper house, small but solid, with a wide front porch and windows that looked out over the valley below. A large dog came bounding from the barn, barking once before recognizing Eli and dissolving into a wiggling mass of tail-wagging excitement. "That's Bear!" Eli climbed down from the wagon and crouched to greet the dog. "He's old and lazy, but he's got a good heart. Won't hurt the baby." Sarah watched him with the dog, the easy affection, the gentle hands, the smile that transformed his serious face into something younger and lighter, and felt something loosen slightly in her chest. Maybe this would be all right. Maybe against all odds, she'd found somewhere safe to land. "Come on," Eli said, straightening. "Let me show you your room." He led her inside, and Sarah found herself in a main room that was clean and surprisingly well kept. Simple furniture, a wood stove in the corner, curtains that hung slightly crooked, but showed someone had tried. The kitchen beyond was organized, if sparse, and the bedroom he showed her was small but bright, with a real bed and a dresser and a window that looked toward the mountains. "It's not fancy," Eli said, that apologetic note in his voice again. "But the mattress is good, and there's a lock on the door, keys on the inside." Sarah turned to look at him standing in the doorway, hat in hand, clearly uncomfortable about being in a bedroom with her even under innocent circumstances. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "The real reason. Not the story about neighbors helping neighbors. The real reason you saw a stranger in trouble and decided to get involved." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "When my sister Rachel was 17, her engagement fell through. Boy's family decided we weren't good enough, not after Ma and Pa died, and everyone figured the ranch would fail. She was heartbroken, humiliated. I couldn't do anything to fix it." His voice dropped lower. "When I saw you on that platform yesterday, surrounded by men who saw your trouble and decided to make it worse, I thought about Rachel. I thought about what I'd want for her if she was ever in that situation. Someone to step up, someone to offer help without expecting anything in return. So, I'm a stand-in for your sister?" "No." His eyes met hers directly. "You're a person who needed help. That's reason enough." Sarah didn't know what to say. She'd spent so long being judged, being found wanting, being treated as a problem to be managed rather than a person to be helped. This simple, straightforward kindness felt almost foreign. "Thank you," she managed finally. "For everything." "You're welcome." Eli stepped back from the doorway. "I'll let you get settled. Supper's at 6, but don't feel obligated to cook tonight. You've had a long journey." He disappeared, and Sarah heard his boots moving through the house, then the front door opening and closing. She sat down on the bed, Rose cradled in her arms, and looked around the small room that was now her home. She'd come west looking for a husband and found betrayal. She'd ended up on a stranger's ranch, employed as a housekeeper, with nothing but his word that she'd be safe. It wasn't what she'd planned. It wasn't what she'd dreamed. But Rose was warm in her arms, and the room had a lock on the door, and somewhere outside a man with kind eyes was unloading supplies from his wagon. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough for now. The first morning at Broken Bow, Sarah woke before dawn. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The bed was too comfortable, the air too clean, the silence too complete. Then memory flooded back the train, the empty platform, Eli Callahan's quiet voice offering help. And she sat up, her heart pounding. Rose was still sleeping in the makeshift crib Eli had fashioned from a dresser drawer lined with blankets. The baby's face was peaceful, her tiny fist curled against her cheek, and Sarah allowed herself one moment of simply watching her breathe. Then she got to work. She found Eli already gone when she emerged from her room, a note on the kitchen table in careful handwriting. Gone to check cattle. Coffee's on the stove. Make yourself at home. Make yourself at home. Sarah looked around the kitchen with new eyes. The shelves were disorganized supplies, scattered without logic. The stove was crusted with burned remnants of meals past. The window over the sink was so grimy she could barely see through it. This was her job now. This was what she could offer in exchange for safety. She rolled up her sleeves and started cleaning. By the time Eli returned 3 hours later, Sarah had scrubbed every surface in the kitchen, reorganized the pantry, washed the windows, and started a pot of soup from the dried beans and salt pork she'd found in the stores. He stopped in the doorway, his eyes widening as he took in the transformation. "You've been busy." "I wanted to earn my keep." Sarah dried her hands on her apron, suddenly nervous. "I hope you don't mind that I reorganized things. The system you had before didn't make much sense for cooking. The system I had was throwing things on shelves and hoping I could find them later." Eli moved into the kitchen, looking around with something like wonder. "I don't think this room's been this clean since my mother was alive." The words hung in the air, weighted with memory and loss. "I'm sorry," Sarah said softly. "I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." His voice was rough. "It's good. It's real good. Just brought back some things, that's all." Rose chose that moment to start crying from the bedroom, and Sarah hurried to get her, grateful for the escape from an emotional moment she didn't know how to navigate. When she returned with Rose on her hip, Eli was at the stove, lifting the lid on her soup pot and inhaling deeply. "This smells like actual food," he said. "Not the kind of food I make, which usually smells like regret and desperation." Despite everything, Sarah laughed. The sound surprised her. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed at anything. "I noticed your cooking skills when I organized the pantry," she said. "The burned residue on most of your pots told quite a story. In my defense, I never claimed to be a cook." Eli turned to face her, and there was a lightness in his expression that hadn't been there before. "That's why I hired you." "Is that the only reason?" The question came out more pointed than she'd intended. Eli's smile faded slightly, and he met her eyes directly. "No," he said. "But it's the reason I can say out loud in polite company." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks and turned away, busying herself with settling Rose in the basket Eli had brought in from the barn. They ate lunch together in careful silence, both of them aware that something had shifted, but neither willing to name it. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Sarah woke early, fed Rose, and started breakfast. Eli would eat with her, telling her about the work he planned for the day, asking if she needed anything from town. Then he'd head out to the ranch work, and Sarah would spend the morning transforming the house. She attacked each room with fierce determination, scrubbing floors, washing windows, beating dust from curtains that probably hadn't been cleaned in years. She found forgotten treasures in neglected corners. A beautiful quilt folded in a cedar chest, a set of china that must have belonged to Eli's mother, a collection of books that revealed someone in this house had once loved poetry. In the afternoons, when Rose napped, Sarah would sit on the porch and watch Eli work in the corral. He was training a young mare, a chestnut, with a nervous disposition, and his patience with the animal was remarkable. "You're good with her," Sarah said one afternoon, emboldened by several days of successful coexistence. Eli looked up, pushing his hat back from his forehead. "Willow. She's coming along. Just needed someone to show her not all humans are mean." "What happened to her?" "Previous owner wasn't kind." His jaw tightened. "Some men think you break a horse by breaking its spirit. I think you earn trust by deserving it." Sarah thought about those words for a long time after. On the 5th day, Eli found her struggling to carry water from the pump to the house. "Here." He took the heavy bucket from her hands. "Let me." "I can manage." "I know you can, but you don't have to." He carried the water inside and set it by the stove, then turned to face her. "Sarah, you've been working yourself to exhaustion since you got here. The house hasn't been this clean in years. The food is better than anything I've ever tasted, but you don't have to prove anything to me." "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to earn my keep." "You already have. 10 times over." His voice softened. "You're not a servant here. You're a guest who happens to help out." "I'm not a guest either." Sarah's voice was sharper than she intended. "I'm an employee. You pay me wages. That makes this a business arrangement." "Is that what you want it to be?" The question caught her off guard. What else would it be? Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I reckon that's something we figure out as we go." He left before she could respond, and Sarah stood in the kitchen with her heart beating too fast, wondering what exactly she'd agreed to when she climbed into his wagon a week ago. That night, she couldn't sleep. Rose was peaceful in her crib. The house was quiet, but Sarah's mind refused to settle. She finally gave up and slipped out to the porch, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cold. She found Eli already there, sitting on the steps with his guitar cradled in his lap. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked. "The quiet takes getting used to." Sarah hesitated, then sat down on the step below his, maintaining a proper distance. In Philadelphia, there was always noise. Carriages, voices, church bells. Here it's so silent I can hear my own thoughts, and they're not always good company. What do they say, your thoughts? That I'm foolish for trusting a stranger. That something will go wrong because something always goes wrong. That Rose deserves better than a guardian who makes desperate choices based on nothing but hope. Eli was quiet for a moment. Then his fingers moved across the guitar strings, picking out a melody that was sad and sweet at the same time. "My mother used to say that hope isn't foolish," he said softly. "She said it takes more courage to hope than to despair. Despair is easy. Hope requires believing in something you can't see yet. Your mother sounds wise." She was. His fingers stilled on the strings. "I miss her every day. Miss both of them. Some mornings I wake up and forget they're gone, and then I remember, and it's like losing them all over again." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "I know that feeling, with Lizzie." "Tell me about her, your sister." So Sarah did. She told him about Lizzie's laugh, her terrible cooking, her gift for seeing beauty in ordinary things. She told him about how Lizzie had protected her when they were children, how she'd taken the blame for Sarah's mistakes, how she'd always believed the best of everyone, even when that belief destroyed her. "She trusted the wrong man," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "He was married, but she didn't know that at first. By the time she found out, she was already pregnant, and he just abandoned her, denied everything. His wife's family was powerful, and they made sure everyone in Philadelphia knew Lizzie was the villain of the story. But she wasn't. Of course she wasn't. She was just a woman who believed in love and got punished for it." Sarah wiped her eyes. "She made me promise to protect Rose from that, from the judgment and the shame. She made me promise Rose would never know she was unwanted by her father. And you kept that promise. You're keeping it." "I'm trying." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "But sometimes I'm so scared I'll fail her. That I'll make the wrong choice, and Rose will pay for it. Eli set his guitar aside and moved down to sit beside her, still maintaining a careful distance, but close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. You crossed a continent alone, with a baby trusting a stranger's letters because you wanted to give that child a better life. That's not making the wrong choice. That's being brave. Or foolish. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes. He turned to look at her, his dark eyes serious in the moonlight. Sarah, I don't know what the future holds. I can't promise you everything will work out perfect. But I can promise you this, as long as you're under my roof, you and Rose are safe. I'll protect you with my life if I have to. Why? The question came out raw, almost desperate. You don't owe me anything. You don't even know me. I'm starting to. His voice was soft. And what I'm learning, it makes me want to know more. Sarah's breath caught. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something she wasn't ready to name. Then Rose started crying inside, shattering the moment, and Sarah jumped to her feet. I should go. Eli's voice was gentle. I'll see you in the morning. She fled inside her heart, pounding her mind, spinning with confusion and fear, and something that felt terrifyingly like hope. The next morning brought visitors. Sarah was kneading bread when she heard the wagon approaching. She wiped her hands and went to the window, her whole body tensing with alarm. But Eli was walking toward the wagon with a smile on his face, and the people climbing down were clearly friends, not threats. That's the Brennans, Eli said when he came to fetch her. Our nearest neighbors. Martha's been dying to meet you since she heard you were staying here. How did she hear? Word travels fast in ranch country. He gave her an apologetic look. Martha means well, but she's a lot. Don't let her overwhelm you. Martha Brennan was a sturdy woman in her 50s with graying hair, sharp eyes, and a voice that could probably be heard in the next territory. Her husband Samuel was quieter, with the weathered face of someone who'd spent decades working under open sky. So you're the woman who finally got Eli to accept some help. Martha seized Sarah's hands the moment she stepped onto the porch. I've been telling this boy for years he needed a housekeeper. Stubborn as a mule he is. Never listens. Martha. Samuel's voice was patient. Let the woman breathe. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Martha released Sarah's hands and looked her over with frank assessment. You're prettier than I expected. When we heard Eli took in Parker's abandoned bride, I thought, well, never mind what I thought. You're here now, and that's what matters. Thank you for coming, Sarah managed. Would you like to come inside? Martha didn't just come inside, she took over. Within minutes, she'd inspected every room, exclaimed over the cleaning Sarah had done, criticized Eli's bachelor ways, and settled herself at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee as if she owned the place. Now then. Her eyes fixed on Sarah with uncomfortable intensity. Tell me everything. How did you end up answering Parker's advertisement? What happened when you arrived? And what exactly is the arrangement between you and young Eli here? Martha. Eli's voice carried a warning. What I'm just asking, what the whole territory wants to know. Girl shows up alone with a baby. Eli brings her home the same day people are going to talk. Might as well get ahead of it with the truth. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she lifted her chin and met Martha's gaze directly. The arrangement is that I work as Mr. Callahan's housekeeper in exchange for room and board and wages. He's been nothing but respectful since I arrived. Of course he has. Eli's not that kind of man. Martha waved a dismissive hand. I'm not accusing anyone of impropriety. I'm just saying that a young woman in your position needs friends, and I'm offering to be one. Martha's right about one thing, Samuel spoke up quietly. Word does travel, and not everyone's going to be as understanding as we are. You'll face judgment in town, questions about your character, your situation, your past. I've faced judgment before. Sarah's voice was steady, even though her hands wanted to tremble. I survived it then. I'll survive it again. Martha's expression shifted to something that looked almost like respect. I believe you will. Here. She reached into the basket she'd brought and pulled out a bundle of fabric. I brought you something. It's not new, but it's good quality. Figured you might not have much in the way of warm clothes, and winter's coming hard this year. Sarah unfolded the bundle to find a heavy wool dress in deep blue, practical but well made. Underneath was a smaller garment, a baby's winter coat clearly hand-sewn with care. I made that for my first grandchild, Martha said gruffly. She outgrew it years ago, but I couldn't bear to throw it away. Figured your little one could use it. Tears stung Sarah's eyes. Mrs. Brennan, I don't know how to... Don't thank me. Just survive the winter and give that baby a good life. Martha's voice was brisk, but her eyes were kind. And call me Martha. We're neighbors now, practically family. The Brennans stayed for lunch, and by the time they left, Sarah had learned more about the territory than she'd known existed. Martha talked constantly about the other ranchers, about Victor Langston's land-grabbing ways, about the harsh winters and the fierce summers, and the particular challenges of raising children in the wilderness. Watch out for Langston, Martha said as she climbed into the wagon to leave. He's been after Eli's land for years, won't take kindly to anything that makes Eli's position stronger. What do you mean stronger? Martha exchanged a look with her husband that Sarah couldn't interpret. Just be careful, both of you. After they left, Eli helped Sarah carry the dishes inside. The silence between them felt different now, weighted with Martha's implications. She meant something by that last comment, Sarah said finally. About Langston not liking anything that makes your position stronger. Martha means a lot of things by a lot of comments. Eli's voice was carefully neutral. Eli. Sarah turned to face him. What aren't you telling me? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Langston's been pressuring me to sell for years. I've always refused. But a single man running a ranch alone is vulnerable, easier to isolate, easier to pressure. And a man with a household looks more established, more permanent. He met her eyes. I didn't bring you here to use you against Langston, Sarah. I want you to know that. Whatever happens with him, it's my fight, not yours. But my being here changes things. Your being here changes everything. The words came out low and tense. And not just because of Langston. Sarah's breath caught. Before she could respond, Rose started crying from the bedroom, and the moment shattered. But as she went to tend to her niece, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the look in Eli's eyes, the hunger in his voice, the way his hands had clenched at his sides as if restraining himself from reaching for her. Something was building between them. Something neither of them was ready to name, but both of them could feel. And Sarah wasn't sure if it terrified her or thrilled her more. 2 weeks passed. Sarah learned the rhythms of ranch life, the early mornings, the hard work, the bone-deep exhaustion that came from physical labor under an unforgiving sky. She learned to bake bread that didn't burn, to stretch meat supplies through clever cooking, to read the weather by the color of the clouds. She learned other things too. The sound of Eli's boots on the porch when he came in for meals, the way his face lit up when he saw Rose, the gentle patience he showed the nervous mare Willow, coaxing her to trust him day by day. She learned that he sang to himself when he thought no one was listening, old hymns his mother had taught him, trail songs from his father's cowboy days. She learned that he carved wooden animals in the evenings, his hands moving with surprising delicacy to create tiny horses and rabbits and birds. She learned that he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking, and that his eyes held something that made her heart race, and her common sense scream warnings. One evening, Eli came inside earlier than usual. "Storm's coming," he said, shaking dust from his hat. "Big one. I need to secure the animals. Can you help me bring in extra firewood?" They worked together as the sky darkened and the wind picked up, hauling wood to the porch, double-checking the barn doors, making sure the chickens were secure. By the time they finished, the first drops of rain were falling fat and cold. They barely made it inside before the sky opened up. That came fast. Eli stood at the window watching the rain hammer against the glass. We'll be stuck inside for at least a day, maybe two. Sarah looked around the small house that suddenly felt much smaller. A day or two trapped together with nowhere to go and nothing to do but talk. The thought should have worried her. Instead, it sent a flutter of anticipation through her chest. That evening after Rose was asleep, they sat by the fire while the storm raged outside. Eli played his guitar and Sarah hummed along when she recognized the melodies. The room felt warm and close, protected from the violence of the weather by solid walls and each other's company. "Can I ask you something?" Eli said, setting the guitar aside. "You can ask. I might not answer." A small smile touched his mouth. "Fair enough. Why did you answer Parker's advertisement, specifically his? There must have been dozens of them." Sarah considered the question. "His letters were kind. He asked about me, about my life, about what I wanted for Rose. Most of the others just listed what they needed: a cook, a housekeeper, someone to warm their bed. Parker made me feel like a person, not a commodity. And that turned out to be a lie." "Yes." Sarah's voice was bitter. "Everything he wrote was a lie. The ranch, the wedding plans, even his name probably. I came all this way chasing words on paper and they meant nothing. Not nothing." Eli leaned forward, his dark eyes intent on her face. "They got you here. They got you out of Philadelphia, away from people who judged you for things that weren't your fault. They brought you to a place where you can start over. They brought me to the middle of nowhere with $17 and a crying baby. They brought you to me." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "Eli..." "I know." He held up a hand. "I know it's too soon. I know you have no reason to trust me, no reason to believe anything I say. I know you came here expecting nothing but a job and a safe place for Rose." He paused, his voice dropping. "But I need you to know that what I feel isn't about needing a housekeeper. It isn't about Langston or the ranch or anything practical. What is it about you?" The single word was raw honest. "It's about you, Sarah. The way you fight for that baby. The way you refuse to be broken by everything that's happened to you. The way you laugh when I make terrible jokes and sing when you think no one's listening, and look at me sometimes like maybe you feel something too." Sarah's hands were trembling. She pressed them flat against her skirt to hide it. "I don't know what I feel," she admitted. "Everything's happened so fast. 3 weeks ago I was on a train believing I was about to start a new life. Now I'm living in a stranger's house, and he's saying things that make me want to believe in something I promised myself I'd never believe in again." "What did you promise yourself?" "That I wouldn't be like Lizzie." Tears burned in Sarah's eyes. "That I wouldn't trust pretty words from a man I barely knew. That I wouldn't let hope make me stupid." "Sarah." Eli stood and moved toward her, slowly, giving her time to retreat if she wanted. "I'm not going to make you promises I can't keep. I can't tell you the future will be easy, or that nothing bad will ever happen. But I can tell you this: every word I've said to you has been true. Every kindness I've shown you has been genuine. And if you give me a chance, I'll spend every day proving that I'm not Parker. I'm not the man who hurt your sister. I'm just a rancher who met a woman in trouble and fell in love with her before he even knew it was happening." Fell in love with her. The words hit Sarah like a physical force. She stood, putting distance between them, her whole body shaking. "You can't say that. You don't know me well enough to say that." "Maybe not." Eli didn't follow her. He just stood there, solid and patient and heartbreakingly sincere. "But I know I want to. I know I want years to learn everything about you. I know I want to watch Rose grow up and maybe give her siblings to play with. I know I want to sit on this porch when I'm old and gray and tell our grandchildren about the day their grandmother stepped off a train in Willow Creek looking lost and fierce and more beautiful than anything I'd ever seen. Stop. Sarah's voice broke. Please stop. All right. Eli took a step back. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said all that. You're not ready and I pushed too hard. It's not that I'm not ready. Sarah turned to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. It's that I'm terrified. Everything you're saying is everything I wanted to hear, and the last time I believed words like that, I ended up stranded and alone. How do I know this is real? How do I know you won't wake up one day and decide I'm too much trouble? You don't. Eli's voice was gentle. That's what faith is. Believing in something you can't prove. Trusting someone even when you've been hurt before. I don't know if I can do that. You don't have to decide tonight. He moved back to his chair, putting safe distance between them. We've got time, Sarah. All the time in the world. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. The storm raged outside, wild and uncontrolled. Inside, Sarah stood in the middle of the room, her heart torn between fear and longing. I need to check on Rose, she said finally. Of course. She retreated to her room and closed the door, leaning against it with her eyes squeezed shut. Rose was sleeping peacefully, unaware of the turmoil in her guardian's heart. Eli Callahan had just told her he loved her. And the terrifying thing, the thing that kept her awake long after the storm had died down to a whisper, was that some part of her wanted to say it back. She didn't, though. Not that night, and not the next morning when they moved around each other with careful politeness, the echoes of his confession hanging between them. But something had changed. A door had been opened that couldn't be closed again, and somewhere deep in her chest, where she'd buried her capacity for hope after Lizzie died, Sarah felt something dangerous begin to bloom, something that felt terrifyingly wonderfully like the beginning of love. 3 days after the storm, Victor Langston came to Broken Bow. Sarah heard the horses' first too many moving too fast. She grabbed Rose from her blanket on the floor and ran to the window, her heart already pounding with alarm. 4 riders were approaching. The man in front sat his horse like he owned the world, silver hair gleaming under an expensive hat, his clothes too fine for ranch work. The 3 men behind him had the hard eyes of hired muscle. Eli emerged from the barn, his whole body going rigid when he saw who was coming. Stay inside, he called to Sarah without turning around. Lock the door. She didn't lock the door. Instead, she stood just inside the threshold with Rose pressed against her chest, watching through the gap. Callahan, the silver-haired man, reined his horse to a stop. Been a while. Not long enough, Langston. So this was Victor Langston. Sarah studied him through the crack in the door, the calculating eyes, the thin-lipped smile that didn't reach them, the way he looked at Eli's ranch like it already belonged to him. Heard you've got company these days. Langston's gaze swept toward the house and Sarah shrank back from the window. Pretty little thing from what my boys tell me. Parker's mail-order bride, wasn't she? What do you want, Victor? Same thing I've always wanted. This land. Langston leaned forward in his saddle. I'm prepared to offer you $8,000. Cash. Today. That's more than this spread is worth, and we both know it. And we both know the answer is no. Think carefully, son. The false friendliness dropped from Langston's voice. A lot's changed since we last talked. You've got something to protect now, something soft and vulnerable. A woman and a baby all alone out here when you're working the far pastures. Sarah's blood ran cold. Is that a threat? Eli's voice had gone deadly quiet. It's an observation. Langston smiled. Accidents happen on ranches. Fires start. Cattle wander off. Sometimes people get hurt when they're in the wrong place at the wrong time. He shrugged. I'd hate to see anything happen to your housekeeper. Eli moved so fast, Sarah barely saw it. One moment he was standing still. The next he had Langston's horse by the bridle, his other hand gripping Langston's leg hard enough to make the older man wince. If you ever threaten her again, Eli said, his voice low and dangerous. I will forget that my mother raised me to be civilized. Do you understand me? The three hired men went for their guns. Eli didn't even look at them. You understand me, Victor? Let go of my horse. Do you understand? A long moment passed. Then Langston nodded once, jerky and forced. Eli released him and stepped back. Get off my land. Don't come back. You're making a mistake, Callahan. Langston straightened his coat with hands that trembled slightly. A big mistake. This land is going to be mine one way or another. The only question is whether you walk away with money in your pocket or get carried away in a pine box. I'll take my chances. Langston wheeled his horse and rode away, his men following. Eli stood watching until they disappeared over the rise. Then his shoulders sagged, and Sarah saw the fear he'd been hiding. She pushed the door open. Eli! He turned. His face was pale beneath the tan, his hands still shaking from adrenaline. I told you to stay inside. I needed to see. Sarah crossed to him, Rose quiet in her arms. He meant it, didn't he? The threats. Victor Langston always means what he says. Eli's voice was heavy. Sarah, I'm sorry. I never should have brought you here. I put you in danger, you and Rose both. You didn't know this would happen. I knew Langston wanted my land. I knew he played dirty. He ran a hand through his hair. I thought having someone here might make him back off. Show him I wasn't isolated anymore. Instead, I gave him another weapon to use against me. I'm not a weapon. Sarah's voice was sharper than she intended. I'm not a pawn in your fight with Langston. I know that. God, Sarah, I know that. Eli reached for her hand, then stopped himself. But he doesn't see it that way. He sees a vulnerability. Something I care about that he can hurt. Something I care about. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning. What are you going to do? Sarah asked quietly. I don't know. For the first time since she'd met him, Eli looked lost. I've been fighting Langston alone for years. Figured I could hold out forever if I had to. But now... He looked at her, at Rose, and his expression crumbled. Now I have something to lose. Sarah made a decision. She'd been making decisions her whole life to stay with Lizzie, to raise Rose, to come west, to trust Eli. Some of those decisions had been wrong. Some had been desperate. But this one felt different. This one felt right. Then don't fight him alone, she said. Eli stared at her. What? You said it yourself. He sees me as a vulnerability because I'm just your housekeeper, someone you hired, someone who could leave. Sarah. But if I wasn't just a housekeeper, if I was something more. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely get the words out. If I was your wife. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. Then Eli's voice, barely above a whisper. What are you saying? I'm saying... Sarah took a breath. I'm saying that 3 days ago you told me you loved me. I didn't answer because I was scared. I'm still scared. But I'm more scared of losing you, than I am of taking a chance. Sarah, I can't let you marry me just because Langston threatened us. It's not just because of Langston. She stepped closer, close enough to see the wild hope in his eyes. It's because when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I want to see is you. It's because when Rose laughs at your terrible jokes, I feel like my heart might burst. It's because for the first time since Lizzie died, I feel like I have a home. You mean that? I mean it. Sarah reached up and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath her palm. I love you, Eli. I think I've loved you since you stepped between me and Garrett on that train platform. I was just too afraid to admit it. Eli made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. His hands came up to cup her face, so gentle, so careful, like she was something precious he was afraid to break. Say it again, he whispered. I love you. He kissed her, then soft and sweet and desperate all at once. Rose squirmed between them, making a noise of protest, and they broke apart laughing. "I love you too," Eli said, his forehead pressed against hers. "God, Sarah, I love you so much it scares me." "Then let's be scared together." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes shining. "You really want to do this? Marry me." "I really want to do this. We could go to town tomorrow. Reverend Mitchell in Willow Creek, he'd marry us. Martha and Samuel could stand as witnesses." Tomorrow. Sarah tested the word. Tomorrow she would be someone's wife. Tomorrow Rose would have a father. Tomorrow everything would change. "Unless you want to wait," Eli added quickly. "If you need more time, I don't need more time." Sarah kissed him again, quick and fierce. "I've spent my whole life waiting for something good to happen. For once I want to grab it before it slips away." They told Martha that evening, when they rode to the Brennan Ranch to ask her and Samuel to witness the wedding. Martha burst into tears. "I knew it!" she sobbed, crushing Sarah in a hug that nearly squeezed the breath out of her. "I knew it from the first moment I saw you two together. The way he looked at you, the way you looked at him, it was obvious." "It wasn't obvious to us," Sarah managed. "That's because you were both being stubborn fools." Martha released her and turned to Eli. You've been alone too long. This woman is the best thing that ever happened to you, and if you do anything to hurt her—" "I won't." Eli's voice was solemn. "I swear, Martha, I'll spend the rest of my life making her happy." "See that you do." Martha dabbed at her eyes. "Now about the wedding. You can't get married in that dress, Sarah. It's not proper." "I don't have anything else? Then I'll lend you something." Martha was already bustling toward the house. "I have my mother's wedding dress in a trunk. It's old-fashioned, but it's beautiful. And we need flowers, and someone to watch Rose during the ceremony, and—" "Martha." Samuel's quiet voice cut through his wife's planning. "Let them breathe. I'm just trying to help." "I know, dear. But maybe they want something simple." Eli and Sarah exchanged a look. "Simple is good," Sarah said. "I don't need a fancy dress or flowers. I just need Eli and Rose and a minister to make it legal." Martha looked horrified. "But—" "She's right." Samuel put a hand on his wife's arm. "A wedding doesn't need trappings to be real. It just needs love." Martha sighed. "Fine. But you're at least letting me bring food. I won't have a wedding celebration without proper cake." The wedding was the next afternoon. Sarah wore her blue wool dress, the one Martha had given her, and pinned her hair up with borrowed pins. Rose wore the white gown that had been packed for the journey, too small now, but still fitting for the occasion. The church in Willow Creek was small, barely more than a room with a cross on the wall and rough-hewn pews. Reverend Mitchell was a thin, kind-faced man who seemed genuinely pleased to perform the ceremony. "Dearly beloved," he began, and Sarah's heart started pounding. This was real. This was happening. She was about to bind her life to a man she'd known for less than a month. But when she looked at Eli standing tall and nervous in his best clothes, with his dark hair combed back, and his eyes fixed on her like she was the only thing in the world, all her doubts evaporated. She loved him. He loved her. Everything else was details. "Do you, Elijah James Callahan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." Eli's voice was steady and sure. "And do you, Sarah Catherine Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Sarah looked into Eli's eyes. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by God and the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife." Reverend Mitchell smiled. "You may kiss your bride." Eli kissed her gently, reverently, like a promise being sealed. Martha burst into fresh tears. Samuel smiled his quiet smile, and Rose, held by Martha throughout the ceremony, clapped her tiny hands as if she understood exactly what had happened. "Mrs. Callahan," Eli murmured against Sarah's lips. "I like the sound of that." "So do I." They celebrated at the Brennan Ranch afterward, Martha's cake, Samuel's best whiskey, laughter and warmth, and the feeling of family that Sarah hadn't experienced since before Lizzie died. To Eli and Sarah, Martha toasted, raising her glass. "May your love grow stronger every year, may your home be filled with joy, and may Victor Langston choke on his own spite." "Martha." Samuel looked scandalized. "What?" "We were all thinking it." Eli laughed, pulling Sarah closer against his side. "I'll drink to that." They rode home as the sun was setting, Rose sleeping in Sarah's arms, the wagon wheels creaking over the rutted road. Neither of them spoke, but the silence was comfortable now, full of anticipation rather than uncertainty. When they reached the ranch, Eli helped Sarah down from the wagon with exaggerated care, then surprised her by sweeping her up into his arms. "What are you doing?" "Carrying my bride over the threshold." His eyes sparkled. "It's tradition." "You're going to drop me?" "Never." He carried her into the house, kicking the door closed behind them, and set her down gently in the middle of the room. "Welcome home, Mrs. Callahan." Sarah looked around the small house, her house, now their house, and felt tears prick her eyes. "It's already been home for weeks. I was just too stubborn to admit it." "We're both stubborn." Eli took her hands in his. "I think that's why we work." Rose stirred in Sarah's arms, fussing, and the moment shifted. "She's hungry. I should feed her and put her down." "Take your time." Eli's voice was soft. "I'm not going anywhere." Sarah nursed Rose and changed her, then settled her into the crib that Eli had built during his evenings of woodworking. The baby's eyes drifted closed, almost immediately exhausted from the excitement of the day. When Sarah emerged from her room, their room now, Eli was waiting by the fire. "She's asleep," Sarah said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, nervous and breathless. "Good." Eli stood, closing the distance between them, slowly giving her time to retreat. "Sarah, I meant what I said before. We don't have to rush anything. If you need time, I've had time." Sarah reached up and began unbuttoning the collar of her dress, her fingers trembling but determined. "I've had 28 years of time. I don't want to wait anymore." Eli's breath caught. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." She met his eyes, letting him see everything she felt, the love, the desire, the trust. "I'm your wife now. I want to be your wife in every way." He kissed her, then not gentle this time, but fierce, hungry, full of all the restraint he'd been holding back. Sarah melted into him, her hands finding his shoulders, his hair the strong line of his back. "I love you," he murmured against her skin. "God, Sarah, I love you so much." "Show me." He carried her to the bedroom, and the door closed softly behind them. Later, much later, Sarah lay in Eli's arms, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. The fire had burned low, casting dancing shadows across the walls, and outside the window, she could see a sky full of stars. "What are you thinking?" Eli asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "That I'm happy." Sarah smiled against his chest. "Really, truly happy. I didn't know I could still feel this way. You deserve to feel this way every day." He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you do. Even if Langston makes trouble. Especially then." Eli's arms tightened around her. "He can take everything else, Sarah. The land, the cattle, all of it. But he can't take this. He can't take you. I'm not going anywhere. Promise. Promise." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since Lizzie died, Sarah slept without nightmares. The attack came 3 days later. Sarah was in the garden with Rose when she heard Eli shouting from the far pasture. She dropped her trowel and ran toward the sound, her heart in her throat. She found him at the eastern fence line, or what had been the fence line. The posts were pulled out of the ground, the wire cut and tangled, and cattle were streaming through the gap, bellowing in confusion as they scattered toward the rocky canyon beyond. "Someone cut the fence," Eli said, his face white with fury. "Pulled the post right out. Sarah, I need you to ride to the Brennans. Tell Samuel what happened. I need help rounding up the cattle before they get into the canyon and hurt themselves." "I can help you." "No." His voice was sharp. "I don't know if whoever did this is still nearby. I need you and Rose somewhere safe. Please, Sarah." She wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in his eyes, not for himself, but for her, and nodded. "I'll be fast." She ran back to the house, bundled Rose into her carrying sling, and saddled Willow with hands that shook. The mare was calm, trusting, responding to Sarah's inexperienced commands with patient grace. The ride to the Brennan Ranch took 30 minutes. By the time Sarah arrived, she was breathless and terrified. "Langston," Samuel said grimly when she told him what had happened. "This has his fingerprints all over it." "Can we prove it?" "Probably not. He's too smart to leave evidence." Samuel was already saddling his horse. "Martha, stay here with Sarah and the baby. I'll take the boys and help Eli round up those cattle." "I'm going back with you," Sarah said. "Sarah, he's my husband." Her voice was fierce. "I'm not hiding while he's in danger." Samuel studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but you stay back from the cattle work. Just being there is enough." They rode back to Broken Bow together, Samuel, his 3 grown sons, and Sarah with Rose strapped to her chest. By the time they arrived, Eli and the men were already working, shouting and riding to turn the scattered cattle back toward safety. Sarah watched from the ridge, her heart pounding every time Eli disappeared into the dust cloud. The work was dangerous. Cattle were unpredictable. The rocky terrain treacherous, but slowly, painfully, the herd was gathered and driven back through the destroyed fence. When it was finally over, Eli rode up to where Sarah waited, his face gray with exhaustion and dust. "We got them all," he said. "Lost 2 calves in the canyon, but the rest are safe." "What about the fence?" "Samuel's boys are fixing it now." Eli dismounted and pulled Sarah into his arms, not caring about the dust or the watching men. "I was so scared something would happen to you while I was out there. I was scared for you. This is just the beginning." His voice was heavy. "Langston's sending a message, showing me he can get to me whenever he wants." "What are we going to do?" Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "We fight back. Not with violence, that's what he wants, but with endurance. We document everything, strengthen our defenses, reach out to the other ranchers he's pressured, and we don't let him see us afraid. Even if we are afraid. Especially then." Eli pulled back to look at her. "Brave doesn't mean not being scared. Remember, it means doing what's right, even when you're terrified." Sarah thought of everything she'd survived Lizzie's death. The scandal, the journey west, the abandonment. She'd made it through all of that. She could make it through this too. "Then we fight," she said. "Together." Eli kissed her forehead. "Together." That night, after Samuel and his sons had gone home, and Rose was asleep in her crib, Eli taught Sarah to shoot. "I hate this," he said, showing her how to load the rifle. "I hate that you need to know this. I need to be able to protect myself." Sarah took the rifle, feeling its unfamiliar weight in her hands. "And Rose." "I know." Eli positioned her arms, corrected her stance. "But it doesn't mean I have to like it." She practiced until her shoulder ached from the recoil and her ears rang from the noise. She wasn't good, not yet, but she could hit a target at 50 yards, and that was enough for now. When they finally went inside, Sarah felt different. Harder somehow. More prepared for whatever was coming. "I'm sorry," Eli said as they got ready for bed. "For all of this. You didn't sign up for a war." I signed up for you. Sarah took his hands in hers. Whatever comes with that, I accept. We're partners now, remember, for better or worse. This is definitely worse. Then we'll find the better. She kissed him softly. Come to bed, husband. Tomorrow we can worry about Langston. Tonight, I just want to be your wife. He smiled, some of the weight lifting from his shoulders. How did I get so lucky? I ask myself the same question every day. They made love slowly that night, tenderly clinging to each other against the darkness that waited outside. And when Sarah finally fell asleep in Eli's arms, she dreamed of Lizzie smiling at her, approving of the life she was building from the ashes of everything they'd lost. The next morning brought more trouble. Sarah was making breakfast when she heard horses approaching again. Too many again, too fast. She grabbed Rose and the rifle, her heart hammering as she positioned herself near the window. But it wasn't Langston's men who rode into the yard. It was a woman. She was perhaps 40, expensively dressed, riding a fine horse, with the easy grace of someone who'd grown up wealthy. Her face was pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. Eli emerged from the barn, his hand on his pistol. "Can I help you, ma'am? Are you Elijah Callahan?" The woman's voice was strained. "The one who's been standing up to my husband." Sarah's breath caught. This was Victor Langston's wife. "I'm Callahan," Eli said cautiously. "What do you want?" "I want to warn you." The woman dismounted, nearly stumbling. "Victor's planning something worse than cutting fences. He's got men coming from Billings' hired guns. He's talking about making an example of you." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired." The woman's voice broke. "Tired of what he's become. Tired of watching him destroy good people to feed his greed. Our son died 5 years ago, and Victor, he changed after that. Became obsessed with building something that would last. Something that would make the boy's death mean something." She wiped her eyes. "But Tommy wouldn't have wanted this. He wouldn't have wanted his father to become a monster." Sarah stepped onto the porch, Rose in her arms, and the woman's eyes went to her. "You're the wife," Mrs. Langston said. "The one Victor keeps talking about. He says you're the key, that if he can get to you, your husband will fold." "He's wrong." Sarah's voice was steady. "Eli won't abandon his land, and I won't abandon Eli." "Then you're braver than most." Mrs. Langston turned back to Eli. "There's a federal marshal coming through the territory next month. He's investigating land fraud. Someone filed a complaint about Victor's methods. If you can hold out until he gets here, if you can document what Victor's doing—" "You could testify," Sarah said suddenly. "You know everything. You could help us." Fear flickered across Mrs. Langston's face. "I can't. Victor he'd never forgive me. I've stayed silent all these years. I've looked the other way while he—" She stopped, shaking her head. "I'm not brave enough. I'm sorry. I'm just not." "Then why come here at all?" Eli asked. "Because I can at least warn you. Give you time to prepare." She mounted her horse again, her movements jerky with urgency. "The men from Billings will be here in 3 days, maybe 4. After that—" She shook her head. "After that, I don't know what Victor's planning, but it won't be good." She rode away without looking back, disappearing over the rise in a cloud of dust. Eli and Sarah stood in silence, processing what they'd just learned. 3 days, Sarah said finally. "We have 3 days. Maybe less." Eli's jaw was set. "I need to ride to the Brennans, tell them what's coming. We need to organize the other ranchers, set up watches, prepare for Eli." Sarah caught his arm. "Look at me." He turned and she saw the fear he was trying to hide, the same fear she felt in her own chest. "We knew this was coming," she said quietly. "We knew Langston wouldn't give up. At least now we know when. We can prepare. We can fight. Sarah, if something happens to you, nothing's going to happen to me." She put her hand on his face, making him focus on her. I'm not the same woman who stepped off that train. You've taught me to shoot. You've taught me to be brave. And I've got something to fight for now. This home, this family, you. I can't lose you. You won't. Sarah kissed him fiercely. Now go. Ride to the Brennans, organize the neighbors. I'll start preparing here. What will you do? Whatever needs to be done. She straightened her shoulders. I'm Sarah Callahan now, and nobody threatens my family. Something shifted in Eli's expression. Pride, love, determination. He pulled her close for one more kiss, deep and desperate. I love you, he said against her lips. I love you too. Now go. We've got 3 days to get ready for war. He rode out 10 minutes later, and Sarah watched him go, with her heart full of fear and resolve in equal measure. 3 days, maybe less. Whatever came next, she would face it standing up. For Eli, for Rose, for the home they'd built against impossible odds. And if Victor Langston thought he could break them, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next 3 days were the longest of Sarah's life. Eli rode from ranch to ranch gathering allies, sharing Mrs. Langston's warning. By the second night, 6 families had committed to stand together: the Brennans, the Fletchers, the Jamesons, the Coopers, the Hayes family, and a quiet widower named Tom Mercer, who'd lost his wife to one of Langston's previous campaigns. We've been letting him pick us off one by one, Samuel Brennan said at the meeting held in Eli's kitchen. That ends now. We watch each other's backs, we document everything, and we don't give in. Sarah served coffee and listened Rose sleeping in her arms. The men talked strategy, patrol schedules, emergency signals, escape routes. But underneath the practical planning, she could feel the fear. These were farmers and ranchers, not fighters. They had families, children, everything to lose. What about the women and children? Martha asked, voicing what everyone was thinking. If Langston brings hired guns, this could turn into a shooting war. The Mercer place is the most defensible. Tom spoke up, his voice rough with disuse. Stonewall's good sightlines. If things get bad, we move everyone there. And leave our homes unprotected. Mrs. Fletcher's voice was sharp with anxiety. Homes can be rebuilt. Eli's voice cut through the rising panic. People can't. If it comes down to property or lives, we choose lives. Every time. The meeting broke up near midnight. Sarah stood on the porch watching the wagons and horses disappear into the darkness, feeling the weight of what was coming pressing down on her chest. You should try to sleep, Eli said, coming to stand beside her. So should you. Can't. He stared out at the night. Every time I close my eyes, I see Langston's men riding in. See them hurting you, hurting Rose. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. I know I trust you. Sarah took his hand. I know we're not alone. And I know that giving up isn't an option. Eli pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. How did you get so brave? I learned from you. They went to bed, but didn't sleep, holding each other in the darkness, waiting for dawn. The attack came on the 4th day, not the 3rd. Sarah was hanging laundry when she smelled smoke. Her head snapped up, nostrils flaring, and then she saw it, black smoke billowing from the direction of the barn. She dropped the sheet she was holding and ran screaming for Eli. He came sprinting from the far pasture, his face going white when he saw the flames already licking up the eastern wall. The horses, Sarah cried. Eli, the horses are inside. He didn't hesitate. He ran straight for the barn doors, yanking them open, despite the heat plunging into the smoke. Sarah heard the terrified screaming of animals, the crash of something falling, and her heart stopped. Eli. He emerged moments later, leading his black horse and Willow by their halters, both animals wild-eyed with terror. Behind him, the barn wall collapsed in a shower of sparks. The water trough. Eli shoved the horses' leads into Sarah's hands. Get buckets, get anything. They fought the fire together, a desperate losing battle. Sarah pumped water until her arms screamed, hauling bucket after bucket, while Eli threw them on flames that seemed to grow faster than they could fight. Then she heard hoofbeats and looked up to see Samuel Brennan and his sons riding hard toward them. "Saw the smoke from our place." Samuel was already off his horse grabbing a bucket. "Martha's ringing the bell, others will come." More neighbors arrived within the hour, the Fletchers, the Jamesons. Even Tom Mercer on his aging mare. Together, they beat back the flames, saving the barn's frame, though the eastern wall was destroyed and half the winter hay was gone. When it was finally over, they stood in a circle blackened and exhausted, staring at the smoldering ruin. "This was Langston," Samuel said. It wasn't a question. "Had to be." Eli's voice was hollow. "No lightning, no accident could have started that fire. Someone set it deliberately." "Did anyone see anything?" Mrs. Fletcher asked. "I was in the far pasture." Eli shook his head. "Sarah was doing laundry. By the time we noticed the smoke, whoever did this was long gone." "They wanted to send a message." Tom Mercer's gravelly voice carried a lifetime of bitterness. "Same thing happened to my Mary. She was alone when they set our barn on fire. Tried to save the animals herself." He stopped, his weathered face twisting with old grief. "The smoke got her before the flames did." Sarah felt cold despite the lingering heat from the fire. That could have been her. If she'd been closer to the barn, if she'd tried to save the horses alone. "We need to document this." She said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Write down everything. The date, the time, exactly what we saw. If the marshal is really coming." "The marshal's still 3 weeks out." Samuel interrupted. "We might not last 3 weeks." "Then we last 3 weeks." Eli's jaw was set. "We take shifts watching each property. We sleep in our clothes with weapons ready. We don't let them catch us off guard again." The neighbors stayed to help repair what they could, but the damage was extensive. Half the winter hay was gone, feed they'd been counting on to get the cattle through until spring. Without it, Eli would have to sell part of his herd at low prices or watch them starve. "This is what Langston wants," Sarah said that night as she cleaned the soot from Eli's hair. "He's trying to bleed you dry, make you give up without a direct fight. I know." Eli leaned into her, touch exhausted. "It's working." "Don't say that." "It's true." He turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before: defeat. "Sarah, maybe I should just sell. Take whatever Langston offers and start over somewhere else. At least you and Rose would be safe." "No." The word came out fierce, absolute. "We are not giving up. I can't watch them burn everything I've built. I can't risk them hurting you." "Then don't watch alone." Sarah knelt in front of him, taking his hands. "Eli, listen to me. If we run now, Langston wins. And not just against us, against everyone. The Brennans, the Fletchers, all the families who are standing with us because they believe we can beat him. If we fold, they lose hope. And if we stay and something happens to you, then we'll deal with it together." She squeezed his hands hard. "I didn't survive everything I've survived just to give up when things get hard. Neither did you." Eli was quiet for a long moment. Then something shifted in his expression. The defeat fading, replaced by the stubborn determination she'd first seen on the platform in Willow Creek. "You're right," he said slowly. "Running would just prove Langston can take whatever he wants. And I'll be damned if I let that man think he can threaten my wife and get away with it." Sarah kissed him fiercely. "That's more like it." The next assault came 2 days later, but it wasn't physical. Sarah was in town buying supplies when she saw the newspaper. It was tacked to the general store's notice board, a single printed sheet with a headline that made her blood run cold. "Questions surround Callahan bride. Mysterious woman's past raises concerns." She tore the paper down and read it with shaking hands. The article was poison-wrapped in polite language. It questioned whether Sarah was really a widow or merely claiming the title. It speculated about Rose's parentage. Was the child truly her niece, or perhaps her own illegitimate daughter? It hinted at scandal in Philadelphia, at a family ruined by immoral behavior, at a woman who had attached herself to a respectable rancher through questionable means. Every word was designed to destroy her reputation, to turn the community against her, to isolate Eli from the neighbors who were standing with him. "Mrs. Callahan." The store clerk was watching her with naked curiosity. "You all right?" Sarah looked up, and she saw it in his eyes, the doubt, the speculation, the willingness to believe the worst. "Who printed this?" Her voice came out cold and hard. "Don't rightly know, ma'am. It was just posted this morning." Sarah crumpled the paper in her fist and walked out of the store, her head held high despite the whispers she could hear starting behind her. She made it halfway home before she had to stop the wagon and cry. Rose, strapped in beside her, reached out with tiny hands to pat Sarah's wet cheeks, making soft sounds of distress. Sarah gathered the baby close and let herself sob, letting out all the fear and rage and humiliation she'd been holding in. This was Langston's real weapon. Not fire, not threats, but shame. He'd found out about Lizzie about the scandal in Philadelphia, and he was using it to destroy everything Sarah had built. When she finally reached the ranch, Eli took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. "Sarah, what happened?" She handed him the crumpled newspaper without a word. She watched his expression change, as he read confusion, then anger, then a fury so intense it transformed his face into something almost unrecognizable. "I'll kill him," Eli said quietly. "I swear to God I'll ride to his ranch and put a bullet in his head." "No." Sarah's voice was exhausted. "That's exactly what he wants. Give him an excuse to bring the law down on you." "Then what do we do?" Eli threw the paper down. "Let him spread these lies. Let people believe what they want. The ones who matter already know the truth." "This isn't just about us." Eli paced the room, his hands clenched into fists. "If people start believing that Rose is, they'll stop supporting us. The alliance will fall apart." "Then we don't let it fall apart." Sarah took a shaky breath, an idea forming. "Sunday is church service. The whole community will be there." "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that lies spread in darkness, but truth is spoken in the light." Sarah met his eyes. "I'm going to stand up in that church and tell everyone exactly who I am, where I came from, why I'm here. All of it." "Sarah, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." Her voice hardened. "Langston is counting on me being too ashamed to fight back. He's counting on me hiding, letting the rumors grow until no one trusts us. But he doesn't know me. He doesn't know what I've survived." She squared her shoulders. "I am not ashamed of my sister. I am not ashamed of Rose. And I will not let that man use my past as a weapon against my family." Eli stared at her for a long moment. Then he crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "Have I told you lately how much I love you? You could stand to mention it more often." He laughed, a broken sound of relief. "I love you, Sarah Callahan, and I am so damn proud to be your husband." Sunday came cold and clear. Sarah dressed carefully in her best clothes, pinned her hair with steady hands, and held Rose close as Eli drove the wagon into town. Her heart was pounding, but her resolve was iron. The church was fuller than usual. Word of the newspaper article had spread, and curiosity had drawn even families who rarely attended services. Sarah felt the weight of stares as she walked down the aisle to her seat, heard the whispers that stopped just a moment too late. The Brennans were there. Martha giving Sarah a fierce nod of encouragement. The Fletchers sat stiffly, their expressions uncertain. The Coopers had moved to the back, and Sarah noticed they wouldn't meet her eyes. When Reverend Mitchell finished his sermon and asked if anyone had words to share, Sarah stood before she could lose her nerve. "Reverend, I'd like to speak." The church went silent. Eli squeezed her hand once, then let go, trusting her to do what needed to be done. Sarah walked to the front of the church, Rose in her arms, and turned to face the congregation. "Most of you have heard rumors about me by now." She began, her voice clear, despite the trembling in her chest. Some of you have probably seen that newspaper article. I'm here to tell you the truth, all of it, because I'd rather be judged for reality than condemned for lies. She took a breath. My name is Sarah Callahan, born Sarah Whitmore in Philadelphia. I had a sister named Elizabeth Lizzie, we called her. She was 4 years older than me, and she was the best person I ever knew. Sarah's voice caught, but she pushed on. When Lizzie was 25, she fell in love with a man who seemed respectable. He courted her properly, made promises, told her he wanted to marry her. By the time she discovered he was already married with a family, she was carrying his child. Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Sarah ignored them. The man denied everything. His wife's family was wealthy and powerful, and they made sure everyone in Philadelphia knew their version of the story, that Lizzie was a seductress, a liar, a woman of loose morals who had pursued a married man deliberately. None of it was true. But truth doesn't matter when lies are louder. She held Rose up slightly, letting everyone see the baby's innocent face. Lizzie died giving birth to this child. Her last words to me were a plea: protect Rose. Give her a good life. Make sure she never knows the shame of how she was born. Sarah's voice hardened. I've kept that promise through everything. Through losing my job because no respectable house would employ me. Through watching my parents die of grief and shame. Through answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride because it was the only way I could see to give Rose a chance at a fresh start. I came to Montana expecting to marry a man named William Parker. He had lied about everything. When I arrived in Willow Creek, I had $17, a crying baby, and no options. She looked directly at Eli, drawing strength from his steady gaze. Eli Callahan offered me help when no one else would. He gave me a job, a home, and his respect, never asking for anything improper, never taking advantage of my vulnerability. He fell in love with me, and I fell in love with him, and we married because we chose each other. Not from desperation, from love. Sarah turned back to the congregation. Victor Langston wants you to believe I'm someone shameful. He wants you to doubt my character, to question my marriage, to turn away from us because supporting the Callahans might mean supporting a fallen woman. Her voice rose with righteous anger. But I am not fallen. I am not ashamed. I am a woman who survived tragedy, crossed a continent to protect my sister's child, and built a life with a good man who treats me with honor and respect. If that makes me unworthy in anyone's eyes, then their judgment says more about them than it does about me. She paused, letting the silence stretch. Victor Langston has threatened my husband's land. He's cut our fences, burned our barn, and now he's trying to destroy my reputation. He's doing this because we refuse to sell, and because we've helped organize the families he's been bullying for years. But we're not going to stop. And we're not going to be silenced by lies. Sarah looked around the church, meeting eyes that had avoided hers before. I'm asking you to judge me by what you've seen, by my actions, my character, the life I'm building here, not by poison printed on paper, by a man who wants to take what doesn't belong to him. She sat down. The church was utterly silent. Then Martha Brennan stood up. I've known Sarah Callahan for weeks now, Martha said, her voice ringing. I've watched her transform Eli's bachelor house into a home. I've seen her care for that baby with more love than some mothers show their own blood children. And I've never met a woman with more courage or integrity. I stand with the Callahans. Samuel stood beside his wife. As do I. One by one, other families rose. The Fletchers, the Jamesons, Tom Mercer, even the Coopers, who'd been sitting in the back trying to avoid notice, finally stood with shame-faced reluctance. By the end, more than half the congregation was standing. Reverend Mitchell smiled from the pulpit. I believe that's about as clear an answer as anyone could ask for. Mrs. Callahan, thank you for your honesty. This community is blessed to have you. After the service, people Sarah had never spoken to came to shake her hand, to offer words of support, to apologize for believing rumors before they knew the truth. She accepted their kindness with grace, while her heart hammered with relief and residual terror. You were magnificent, Eli said as they drove home. "I've never seen anything like it." I was terrified. "Didn't show." He reached over to squeeze her hand. "Sarah, what you did today. You changed things. People will remember this." "Will it be enough?" "I don't know." His voice was honest. "But it's a start." The retaliation came faster than they expected. That very night, Sarah woke to the sound of gunshots. She bolted upright, her heart slamming against her ribs, and found Eli already pulling on his boots with his rifle in hand. "Stay here," he said. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "Eli, promise me." "I promise. Be careful." He kissed her hard and was gone. Sarah gathered Rose from her crib and retreated to the corner of the room, the rifle she'd learned to shoot clutched in her sweating hands. The baby was miraculously still asleep, unaware of the danger surrounding them. Outside, she could hear shouting Eli's voice. Other voices she didn't recognize, the thunder of hooves. Another gunshot cracked through the night, and Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger. Then silence. Minutes passed. An eternity. Finally, she heard boots on the porch and Eli's voice calling her name. "Sarah, it's me. It's safe." She unlocked the door with shaking hands. Eli stood there, his face grim but unhurt, flanked by Samuel Brennan and two of his sons. "What happened?" "Langston's men," Eli said. "3 of them, trying to cut the fence again, maybe worse. We chased them off." "Anyone hurt?" "Daniel Cooper caught some buckshot in his arm. Nothing serious, but—" Eli's jaw tightened. "This is escalating. They came with guns this time, Sarah. Actually shooting. Did you recognize any of them?" "Garrett." The name came out like a curse. "The one from the train platform. He was leading them." Sarah felt cold. Garrett, who'd looked at her like prey. Garrett, who worked for Langston and clearly enjoyed hurting people. "What do we do now?" "Now, we don't let our guard down." Samuel's voice was heavy. "I'm leaving my boys here tonight. Tomorrow we reorganize the patrols. No property left unprotected day or night." The next 2 weeks were a siege. Langston's men probed their defenses, constantly appearing at odd hours, firing shots to keep them awake, leaving evidence of their presence like cats playing with mice. Water troughs were poisoned. Gates were left open. Threatening messages were nailed to fence posts. Sarah stopped sleeping more than a few hours at a time. Dark circles appeared under her eyes. Rose, sensing her tension, became fussy and difficult to soothe. But the community held. The alliance of 6 families organized rotating patrols. They shared supplies, shared watch duties, shared the burden of constant vigilance. When the Fletcher barn was targeted, 3 families arrived within an hour to help save it. When the Jamesons' well was sabotaged, neighbors hauled water until it could be repaired. "This is what Langston didn't count on," Martha said during one of their planning meetings. "He thought he could pick us off one by one like he always has. He didn't expect us to stand together." "We have to hold out 2 more weeks," Eli said. "The marshal is coming. If we can just make it until then." "If," Tom Mercer said darkly. "Langston knows the marshal is coming too. He's going to do something big before then. Something to break us." "Then we'll be ready." But were they? Sarah lay awake that night, listening to Eli's restless breathing beside her, and wondered if hope was enough to carry them through. The answer came 3 days later. Sarah was alone at the ranch Eli had ridden to check on the Coopers, who'd been hit hard the night before, when she heard a wagon approaching. She grabbed her rifle and went to the window, her heart hammering. But it wasn't Langston's men. It was Sheriff Tom Murphy from Willow Creek, and he had papers in his hand. Sarah opened the door, but didn't set down her rifle. "Sheriff, what brings you out here?" Murphy looked uncomfortable, more than uncomfortable, almost ashamed. "Mrs. Callahan, I have a warrant for your arrest." The world tilted. "Arrest?" Sarah's voice came from very far away. On what charges? Child abduction. Murphy wouldn't meet her eyes. The warrant says you took a minor across state lines without proper legal authority. Claims the child's father is filing for custody. Her father? Sarah's voice rose. Her father is a married man who denied she existed. He abandoned Lizzie, destroyed her reputation, and now he wants Rose. I don't know anything about that, ma'am. I just know I have a warrant from a Massachusetts court, and I'm bound by law to execute it. Show me. Murphy handed over the papers. Sarah scanned them with trembling hands, looking for any detail that might help her fight this. Then she found it. Sheriff. She pointed to the date on the judge's signature. This warrant is dated 3 weeks from now. Murphy's face went pale. What? Look, the signature date hasn't happened yet. This document is a forgery. The sheriff stared at the paper, and Sarah watched understanding dawn across his face, along with something that looked like relief. Son of a bitch, he muttered. Pardon my language, ma'am. Langston gave me this himself. Told me it came from Massachusetts courts. He crumpled the warrant in his fist. I knew something wasn't right about this. Should have looked closer. You were doing your job. I was being used. Murphy's expression hardened. Mrs. Callahan, I've looked the other way on a lot of things Langston's done. Told myself it wasn't my business, that he was too powerful to fight. But this, trying to take a baby from her mother using forged documents. I'm not her mother. I'm her aunt. You're the only mother that child's ever known. Murphy met her eyes directly for the first time. And I'm done helping a man who'd rip a baby from the arms of someone who loves her. What are you going to do? First, I'm going to ride back to town and file a report about that forged warrant. Then, I'm going to start documenting every complaint that's ever been filed against Victor Langston. He paused. And when that federal marshal gets here next week, I'm going to tell him everything I know. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Sheriff. Don't thank me yet. Langston's going to be furious when he finds out I've turned on him. Things might get worse before they get better. They can't get much worse. Murphy gave her a grim smile. Ma'am, in my experience, they always can. He rode away, and Sarah stood on the porch with Rose in her arms, watching until he disappeared. When Eli returned an hour later, she told him everything. Murphy's turning. Eli's voice was disbelieving. After all these years of looking the other way, he said forging legal documents to take a child was his line. Sarah shook her head. I think he's been looking for an excuse to break with Langston for a long time. This just gave him one. And the warrant was a forgery. Sloppy too. The date was wrong, signed 3 weeks in the future. Sarah almost laughed. After everything Langston's done, he got caught because someone couldn't be bothered to double-check a date. Eli pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers. 1 week. Murphy said the marshal will be here in 1 week. We just have to survive 7 more days. We can do this. We can do this, he agreed. Together. But as Sarah held her husband and her niece in the fading afternoon light, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was still coming. 7 days. Just 7 more days. And then, one way or another, everything would be decided. The final confrontation came 2 days before the marshal was due to arrive. Sarah was feeding Rose when she heard them coming, not the single horse or small group they'd grown accustomed to, but a thunder of hooves that shook the ground. She grabbed her rifle with one hand, Rose with the other, and ran to the window. Her blood turned to ice. Victor Langston rode at the head of at least 15 men. Behind him came Garrett and the hired guns from Billings, their faces hard and weapons drawn. And trailing at the rear, looking sick with fear, was Sheriff Murphy in handcuffs, guarded by 2 riders. Eli! Sarah screamed. He burst through the back door, took one look at the approaching force, and his face went white. Get Rose and go out the back. Head for the Brennans. Don't stop for anything. I'm not leaving you. Sarah, there's too many of them. I can't fight and protect you at the same time. His voice cracked. Please. For Rose. Go. If I leave, he'll kill you. If you stay, he might kill us both." Eli grabbed her shoulders, his grip bruising. "You're carrying our child, Sarah. I know you haven't told me yet, but I know. I've seen the signs. And I need you to survive, even if I don't." Sarah's breath caught. She hadn't been certain herself until a few days ago hadn't found the right moment to tell him. But he'd known. "I can't lose you," she whispered. "You won't." He kissed her hard, desperate. "Now go. I'll buy you time." Sarah ran. She clutched Rose to her chest and fled through the back door, heading for the tree line where Willow was tied. Her hands shook so badly she could barely mount, but she managed pulling Rose tight against her as she kicked the mare into a gallop. Behind her, she heard Langston's voice carry across the distance. "Stop right there, Callahan. We need to talk." Sarah didn't look back. She rode like death was chasing her because it was. The Brennan Ranch was 8 miles away. Sarah pushed Willow harder than she'd ever pushed a horse, feeling the mare's sides heaving beneath her legs, praying the animal wouldn't stumble on the rough ground. Rose was crying, terrified by the jarring ride, but Sarah couldn't stop to comfort her. Every second counted. Every second was a second closer to help, or a second Eli spent facing 15 armed men alone. She saw the Brennan house when she was still half a mile out and started screaming. "Help, please! They're at the ranch! Langston's at the ranch!" Martha burst onto the porch, Samuel right behind her. By the time Sarah reached them, the whole family was mobilizing. "How many?" Samuel demanded, already grabbing his rifle. "At least 15. Hired guns. They have Murphy." Sarah was sobbing now, unable to stop. "Eli's alone. He made me leave. He made me—" "Martha, take Sarah inside. Boys, get the horses." Samuel's voice was iron. "We ride now. I'm coming with you. Sarah, you can't. He's my husband." Sarah thrust Rose into Martha's arms, her whole body shaking with fury and terror. "Give me a gun." Samuel stared at her for a long moment. Then he handed her his spare rifle. "Stay behind us. Don't do anything stupid." They rode hard, 7 of them now. Samuel, his 3 sons, 2 Fletcher boys who'd been visiting, and Sarah. As they crested the final rise before Broken Bow, Sarah's heart nearly stopped. The ranch was surrounded. Langston's men had formed a rough circle, and in the center, Eli stood alone on the porch, his rifle raised. He was talking, buying time, but even from this distance, Sarah could see the hopelessness in his posture. "We can't take 15 men head-on," Samuel said grimly. "We need a plan." "We need a miracle," one of the Fletcher boys muttered. Sarah looked at the scene below, her mind racing. Langston wanted Eli's land. He wanted submission. He wanted to make an example of the man who dared to defy him, but he also wanted to appear legitimate. That's why he'd tried to use legal documents, however forged. That's why he'd brought Murphy, probably to claim the sheriff had witnessed everything legally. "I have an idea," Sarah said slowly. "But it's dangerous." "Everything's dangerous right now." "No." She turned to Samuel. "I mean dangerous for me specifically. I'm going to ride down there alone." "Absolutely not." "Listen to me." Sarah's voice was fierce. "Langston's whole operation depends on intimidation. He makes examples of people who resist, and others fall in line. But he's never had to deal with someone who refuses to be intimidated, not in public, not with witnesses." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to walk straight up to him and call his bluff." Sarah gripped her rifle. "He won't shoot me in front of this many people. He can't afford the scandal. And while I have his attention, you come in from the other side." Samuel shook his head. "It's too risky." "So is letting my husband die while we argue about tactics." Sarah wheeled her horse. "Give me 5 minutes, then come in fast and loud." She didn't wait for his answer. She kicked Willow into a gallop and rode straight toward the circle of armed men. Heads turned as she approached. Rifles swung toward her. But Sarah didn't slow down. didn't waver, didn't show an ounce of the terror clawing at her chest. "Victor Langston!" Her voice rang out across the yard. "I want to talk to you." Langston turned, his silver eyebrows rising in surprise. "Mrs. Callahan, I thought you'd run away." "I did. Then I decided running wasn't good enough." Sarah brought Willow to a stop just outside the circle of men. "I came back to ask you a question." "And what question is that? Was it worth it?" Sarah's voice was steady, deadly calm. "Your son died, and you've spent 5 years trying to fill that hole by taking everything you can get your hands on. Land power control. But has any of it helped? Has any of it brought Tommy back?" Langston's face went purple with rage. "You don't speak my son's name. Your wife spoke it. She came to warn us. Did you know that she told us Tommy wouldn't have wanted this? Wouldn't have wanted his father to become a monster? Margaret doesn't know what she's talking about." "Doesn't she?" Sarah urged Willow forward a few steps, ignoring the rifles, tracking her movement. "I think she knows exactly what she's talking about. I think she's watched you destroy yourself with grief, and she didn't know how to stop you. This has nothing to do with my son. It has everything to do with your son." Sarah's voice rose. "You lost him, and you've been trying to control everything else ever since because you couldn't control that. But you can't buy your way out of grief, Mr. Langston. You can't threaten it away, or burn it away, or steal enough land to fill the hole it left. Shut up. You can only live with it, the way I live with losing my sister, the way Eli lives with losing his parents." Sarah pointed toward her husband still standing alone on the porch. "You could have been part of this community. You could have had neighbors who respected you, who helped you through your grief. Instead, you chose to be a tyrant, and now everyone hates you. I said shut up. Make me." The words hung in the air. Langston's hand moved toward his pistol, and Sarah saw his finger twitch on the grip. "Go ahead," she said quietly. "Shoot an unarmed woman in front of 20 witnesses. See how that works out for you when the federal marshal arrives tomorrow." Langston froze. "What?" "The marshal. He's a day early, rode in last night and stayed at the Brennan place." The lie came out smooth as silk. "He's seen Sheriff Murphy's documentation of every crime you've committed. He's taken statements from every family you've terrorized. And right now, he's watching from that ridge with a dozen deputies waiting to see if you're stupid enough to add murder to your list of charges." Langston's eyes flicked to the ridge. He couldn't see anyone, there was no one there to see, but doubt flickered across his face. And in that moment of hesitation, the Brennans arrived. They came thundering over the opposite rise, rifles raised, whooping and hollering like a cavalry charge. Langston's men spun to face the new threat, confusion breaking their formation. "It's over, Victor," Samuel Brennan's voice boomed across the yard. "Put down your weapons. The marshals got this whole place surrounded." It was a bluff, the biggest bluff of Sarah's life. But Langston didn't know that, and his men, seeing 7 armed riders bearing down on them and hearing about federal marshals, started to lose their nerve. "Mr. Langston," Garrett's voice was uncertain. "What do we do? Hold your ground." But the hired guns from Billings weren't being paid enough to face federal charges. First one, then another, then 5 more, lowered their weapons and raised their hands. "Smart choice, boys," Samuel said, riding into the circle. "Real smart." Langston's face contorted with fury. He yanked his pistol from its holster and aimed it directly at Sarah. "You think you've won?" His voice was barely human, twisted with rage. "You think you can take everything from me and walk away? Victor, don't." Eli's voice came from the porch, but he was too far away to intervene. "My son is dead," Langston screamed. "My son is dead and you all get to live, and it's not fair. It's not—" A shot rang out. Sarah flinched, waiting for pain, waiting for the impact of a bullet. But Langston crumpled instead, his pistol falling from his hand, blood blooming from his shoulder. Behind him, Sheriff Murphy stood with a smoking gun, and his hands still half bound by broken handcuffs. Should have made sure I couldn't reach my boot knife, Murphy said grimly. Took me a while to get free, but I managed. Langston collapsed to his knees, clutching his wounded shoulder, all the fight draining out of him, along with his blood. It's over, Victor, Murphy said, approaching cautiously. It's finally over. And it was. The real marshal arrived the next morning. His name was James Hawkins, a lean man in his 50s, with steel-gray eyes and a reputation for thorough investigations. He'd actually been on his way when Sarah bluffed about his presence, would have arrived that very afternoon, even without her lie. He spent 3 days taking statements, examining evidence, and building a case that would ensure Victor Langston never threatened anyone again. The charges included land fraud, extortion, arson, assault, attempted murder, and forgery of legal documents. He'll spend the rest of his life in federal prison, Hawkins told Eli and Sarah as he prepared to leave. Might not live to see the end of his sentence, wounded like he is, and old as he's getting. What about his men? Eli asked. The hired guns from Billings are facing their own charges. Garrett and a few others are talking in exchange for lighter sentences. Hawkins shook his head. Langston built his empire on fear and violence. Once that started crumbling, everyone rushed to save themselves. And Mrs. Langston? She's selling the ranch and moving back east to be with family. Hawkins paused. She asked me to tell you she's sorry for not speaking up sooner, for letting her husband become what he became. Sarah thought about the woman who'd ridden to warn them, torn between loyalty to her husband and horror at what he was doing. Tell her I understand. Grief makes us do terrible things sometimes. Hawkins tipped his hat and rode away, leaving Eli and Sarah standing on the porch of their home. Their home finally safe, finally truly theirs. It's over, Eli said, his voice wondering. I keep waiting to wake up and find out this was all a dream. It's not a dream. Sarah leaned into him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. We're safe. The land is safe. Everything we fought for. We get to keep it. Eli pressed a kiss to her temple. Thanks to you. Thanks to us. All of us, the Brennans, the Fletchers, everyone who stood together. Sarah turned to face him. And speaking of us, I have something to tell you. About the baby. Sarah's eyes widened. You already knew. I suspected. Eli's face broke into a smile that transformed his whole expression. The morning sickness, the way you've been eating, how tired you've been. I was waiting for you to be ready to tell me. I was going to tell you the night before Langston came. Then everything happened so fast. Eli dropped to his knees right there on the porch and pressed his ear to her still flat stomach. Hello in there, he murmured. I'm your pa. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Sarah laughed through sudden tears. Eli, it's too early. The baby can't hear you yet. I don't care. I want them to know from the very beginning that they're loved. He looked up at her with shining eyes. We're going to have a baby, Sarah. Our baby. I know. She pulled him to his feet and kissed him soundly. I know. The months that followed were the happiest of Sarah's life. With Langston gone, the territory transformed. Families who'd been living in fear began to rebuild. The alliance of ranchers that had formed to resist him evolved into a genuine community, neighbors helping neighbors not from desperation, but from genuine friendship. The Brennans became like family. Martha fussed over Sarah's pregnancy with the enthusiasm of a prospective grandmother, knitting tiny garments and offering endless advice. Samuel taught Eli new techniques for managing cattle, and the Brennan boys helped repair the fire damage to the barn until it was better than ever. Sarah's garden flourished. She planted vegetables and herbs, flowers for beauty, and medicinal plants for practical use. The house, already transformed by her early cleaning efforts, became truly beautiful curtains that hung straight shelves filled with books and treasures, the smell of fresh bread always in the air. Rose thrived. At 9 months, she took her first steps toddling between Sarah and Eli with delighted shrieks. She learned to say Mama and Papa and Bear, the last referring to the old dog who had appointed himself her guardian. She had no memory of the journey that had brought her here, no knowledge of the mother who died giving her life. To her, Sarah was simply Mama, and the ranch was simply home. Eli continued working the land his parents had built, but now with a lightness he'd never had before. Sarah would watch him ride in from the far pastures, tired and dusty from the day's work, and see his face transform the moment he spotted her on the porch. "I love coming home to you," he told her one evening as they sat watching the sunset. "Used to dread this time of day, the quiet, the loneliness. Now it's what I look forward to most. I love being here when you come home." Sarah leaned against his shoulder. "I love everything about this life we're building. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts." She looked at him, her eyes serious. "The hard parts taught me what this is worth, what you're worth." Their son was born in March on a morning so beautiful it seemed like the whole world was celebrating. Sarah labored through the night while Martha coached her, and Eli paced the floor with Rose in his arms. Near dawn, when she was exhausted and terrified, and certain she couldn't push anymore, Eli broke protocol and came to kneel beside her. "You can do this," he said fiercely. "You're the bravest woman I've ever known. You survived everything life threw at you, and you can survive this. Push, Sarah. Push and bring our son into the world." She pushed. And suddenly there he was, red-faced and screaming, perfect and alive, their son. "Henry!" Sarah breathed as Martha placed the baby on her chest. "Henry James Callahan. After my father." Eli's voice broke. "Sarah, he's beautiful. He's perfect. He has your eyes. And your stubbornness, I'll bet." Eli leaned down to kiss her forehead, then their son's downy head. "Thank you. Thank you for this, for him, for everything." They lay together as the sun rose, their new family complete, Sarah and Eli. Rose toddling over to inspect her baby brother and Henry sleeping peacefully between them. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said quietly. "What's that?" "I'm glad. Glad for everything." She met his eyes. "I'm glad William Parker lied to me. I'm glad I got stranded in Willow Creek. I'm glad I was desperate enough to accept help from a stranger." She touched his face gently. "Because all of it led me here. To you. To this. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts." Eli kissed her softly. "I'm glad too." The years that followed proved everything Sarah had hoped for and more. The ranch prospered. Eli expanded the herd, bought more land from families willing to sell on fair terms, and built a reputation as one of the most respected ranchers in Montana Territory. Sarah became known for her cooking, her garden, and her willingness to help any neighbor in need. Their home was always open, always welcoming, filled with the laughter of children and the warmth of genuine love. Rose grew into a bright, fearless girl who remembered nothing of her difficult beginning. She called Eli Papa without hesitation and treated Henry as a true brother rather than a cousin. When she was old enough to understand, Sarah told her the truth about Lizzie, not as a burden of shame, but as a legacy of love. "Your mother loved you so much," Sarah told her. "She wanted you to have the best life possible. Everything I've done, every choice I've made, was to keep the promise I made her." "And Papa?" Rose asked. "Papa loves you just as much as if you were born to him. You're his daughter in every way that matters." Rose threw her arms around Sarah's neck. "I love you, Mama." "I love you too, sweetheart. Always and forever." Henry grew into a sturdy, thoughtful boy, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn determination. He followed Eli everywhere, learning to ride almost before he could walk, soaking up knowledge about ranching like a sponge. He was gentle with animals, fierce in defense of his sister, and devoted to both his parents with a loyalty that made Sarah's heart ache with pride. And then, 4 years after Henry's birth, came another surprise. "Twins!" Eli's voice cracked on the word. "You're sure?" "Martha's sure." Sarah laughed at his stunned expression. She says she can feel 2 heartbeats. Twins. Eli sat down heavily. Sarah, we're going to have 4 children. I can count husband. 4 children. He looked up at her, wonder replacing shock. We went from nothing to everything, didn't we? From a lonely ranch and a stranded stranger to this. Unexpected blessings. Sarah said softly, remembering the pearl ring on her finger, the one that had belonged to his mother. Things that change everything when they arrive. The twins, a boy and a girl, were born on a snowy December night. James and Elizabeth named for their grandfathers, and for the sister Sarah had lost. They were healthy, loud, and absolutely perfect. Martha cried when she saw them. Samuel declared he'd never seen finer babies. Rose immediately appointed herself their protector, and Henry solemnly promised to teach them everything he knew about horses as soon as they were old enough to sit up. Eli held both babies at once, one in each arm, his face so full of love that Sarah could barely look at him without crying. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured. "We both got lucky." Sarah leaned against him, her hand resting on James's tiny head. "We found each other." 10 years after Sarah stepped off that train in Willow Creek, she stood on the porch of a home that bore no resemblance to the lonely bachelor's quarters she'd first encountered. The house had been expanded twice, once when Rose outgrew sharing a room with Henry, and again when the twins needed their own space. The barn that had partially burned during Langston's campaign was now the finest structure on the property, housing a dozen horses and serving as a gathering place for community events. The yard was full of children, her children, the Brennan grandchildren, kids from neighboring ranches who'd gathered for a summer celebration. Rose, now 15, and beautiful in a way that made Sarah both proud and nervous, was teaching the younger ones to play horseshoes. Henry, 12, and already as tall as his mother, was helping Eli set up tables for the feast. The twins were somewhere in the chaos, their 7-year-old voices carrying above the general din. Martha came to stand beside Sarah, older now, but no less formidable. "Quite a life you've built here." "We built it." Sarah gestured to encompass the whole scene, the house, the land the community gathered to celebrate. "All of us together. You ever think about what would have happened if you'd stayed in Philadelphia? If you'd never answered that advertisement?" Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes. Late at night when I can't sleep. I think about Lizzie, and I wonder if she knows, if somehow she can see what her sacrifice led to. I think she knows." Martha's voice was gentle. "I think she's proud of you." "I hope so." Sarah watched Rose laugh at something Henry said, watched the twins chase each other around the yard, watched Eli lift little Elizabeth onto his shoulders so she could see better. "I hope she knows that Rose is happy. That's all she ever wanted, for Rose to be happy. That child is the happiest girl in Montana Territory. Anyone can see that." Sarah smiled. "She is, isn't she?" That evening, after the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Sarah and Eli sat on the porch in their usual spots. The stars were brilliant overhead, the night warm and peaceful, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to its pack. "What are you thinking?" Eli asked the same question he'd asked her on their first night together all those years ago. "I'm thinking about how far we've come." Sarah reached over to take his hand. "I'm thinking about that scared woman who got off the train in Willow Creek, certain her life was over. And I'm thinking about how wrong she was. Her life wasn't over. No, it was just beginning." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I came west looking for security, a husband, a home, a life. I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought if I could just find someone who'd take care of me and Rose, that would be enough. Was it? It was so much more." Sarah turned to face him, her heart full to bursting. "I didn't just find security, Eli. I found love, real love, the kind I didn't believe in anymore. I found family. I found community. I found a version of myself I didn't know existed. The brave version. The whole version." She touched his face, tracing the lines that hadn't been there when they met, the silver threads appearing in his dark hair. You didn't rescue me. You gave me a place to stand while I rescued myself. And then you loved who I became. Eli turned his head to kiss her palm. I loved who you already were. The rest was just watching you figure it out. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, feeling the solid presence of their home around them. Any regrets? Eli asked finally. Sarah thought about the question seriously. She thought about Lizzie dead too young, remembered only by the sister who'd loved her and the child who bore her legacy. She thought about the scandal in Philadelphia, the shame and ostracism that had driven her west. She thought about William Parker's lies, Langston's threats, all the fear and uncertainty she'd survived. No, she said finally. No regrets. Every step of the journey brought me here, and here is exactly where I want to be. Eli pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her hair. I love you, Sarah Callahan. I love you too, Elijah Callahan. She smiled against his shoulder. I have since the day you asked me if I needed help and actually meant it. Best question I ever asked. Best answer I ever gave. They stayed on the porch until the stars wheeled overhead and the night grew cool. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate sorrows. Sarah thought about the mail-order bride advertisement she'd answered all those years ago. She thought about the desperate hope that had driven her to cross a continent with a baby and a dream. She thought about standing on that platform in Willow Creek, watching her last connection to safety disappear around a bend, certain that her life was over. She had been so wrong. Her life hadn't ended on that platform. It had begun. And now, surrounded by everything she'd fought for, her husband, her children, her home, her community. Sarah finally understood what her sister had known all along. Love was worth the risk. Family was worth the fight. And sometimes the worst moments of your life were just doorways to the best ones. She had traveled 1,000 miles searching for safety. She had found something far more precious instead, a love that made her brave, a home that made her whole, and a cowboy who had promised to help her and kept his word in ways she never could have imagined. Sarah Catherine Callahan had come home at last, and she was never leaving again.